Welcome to the Living Your Legacy podcast.
I'm Kim Rain, a life coach and health mentor with over 13 years experience helping people lower their stress and anxiety, lose weight, sleep better and live happier, healthier, more purposeful lives.
I'm Helen Ranson. I've worked for 20 years as a self-employed psychotherapist and coach, helping clients of all ages and backgrounds who've experienced emotional issues, phobias and personal traumas.
The Living Your Legacy podcast is a quest to create amazing life stories, hang out in the moment and live a life full of joy.
Living Your Legacy is a podcast for anyone who wants to get off the sidelines and create the legacy they want to leave behind today.
Hi guys, so this week it's Kim and I want to bring you an interview that I did with a good friend of mine, Nikki Owen. Nikki is an international thought leader. She's an award-winning speaker. She's a best-selling author and she's an amazing personal breakthrough coach. And her journey has been a real roller coaster that has taken her to the position that she's in today, which is really respected and an absolute expert in her field. But it actually started off, Nikki's journey, she's an expert in charisma and her journey started off when she was 18 years old. And she was involved in a dramatic court case at the Old Bailey that made legal history. And it was her charismatic barrister that inspired her lifelong work into charisma and that's really given her deeper levels of compassion for her clients. So this is actually an interview that we recorded together 2 years ago and we were going to re-record it. But when I listened to it, I was like, no, I want you guys to have it as it stands today. So without further ado, let's go over to Nikki and her story. So Nikki, your story is quite amazing. How, I don't even know where to start. Tell me, I guess it's sort of partly to do with how you got involved in charisma.
Oh, totally. So, I had a relatively normal upbringing. I was a middle class girl and I was a talented dancer. I was doing modeling. We had lovely family holidays together. I had a younger brother and sister. Everything was, relatively normal. And then around about the age of 15, I started experiencing really black moods. And I went through a time where I was self-harming a lot. I had something like 27 stomach pumps. I took weed killer. I shaved off all my hair. I had lovely waist-length hair. I shaved off my eyebrows, cut off my eyelashes, slashed all my body. And I was gaining weight. I'd always been this very kind of slim, young girl that was dancing and modeling. And then suddenly I put on 5 stone. And I ended up, drinking heavily and just binging and hating myself. And then one day I was at home and all my family were out and I just really wanted to die that day. And I ended up setting fire to the curtains in my bedroom. I burnt my parents' house down and I was sent to Holloway prison. I was charged with arson, endangering life. And I was, kind of this very...
How old were you at this point?
I was 17. And at the time, my parents couldn't understand why their perfectly normal daughter that had been this lovely, sweet-natured young girl had suddenly turned into this kind of, violent lunatic. They just couldn't understand it. And so when I was in Holloway prison, they actually asked these psychiatrists, top psychiatrists to come and examine me in prison. And at the time when I was in prison, I had become so violent that I had to be contained within a cell, which was solitary confinement, where they put you in a dress which is made out of indestructible material. So I couldn't hang myself. The cell was kept in darkness. I don't know why they did that. And there was a mattress. I wasn't allowed a blanket, but there was a mattress and there was a potty. And they would feed me through a hatch in a door. And I was in that cell for months. And my parents...
years old.
Yeah. And my parents got these psychiatrists to come and examine me because they couldn't accept that I'd just gone mad. And each report was really damaging. So I was described as a maniacal psychopath, incurably insane and a danger to society, with a recommendation that I serve life in Broadmoor, which is the hospital for the criminally insane. And my parents just said, they said at the time, they just were told to forget about me and to concentrate on their other two children. But they didn't. They kept fighting to find out what was wrong with me. And actually, they stumbled upon the link between my behavior and the link between my periods. And my mother had kept diaries of all my weird kind of incidents. And she realized that it was cyclical, that it happened at a certain time every month. And they worked with a woman at the time, Dr. Katrina Dalton, who was the specialist in premenstrual syndrome. And she agreed to come and examine me in prison. And she examined me in prison, found that I was suffering from extreme premenstrual syndrome. My body wasn't making enough progesterone. And I was immediately taken off all the antidepressants and the sedatives and the tranquilizers that I was put on to keep me kind of like, calm. And I was put on progesterone. And within about 3 weeks, my behavior changed very dramatically. And I was then let out of solitary confinement. And it was decided to call back in all those top psychiatrists to examine me. And they described it as a miracle. And on the 22nd of December, 1978, at the Old Bailey, in court number 13, my case made legal history because it was the first time that premenstrual syndrome was used as a defense, as a mitigating factor in a case, and I walked free. So it was a pretty interesting start to life.
Wow. And then what happened with it? Did you? I mean, that is just I've heard that story a few times before, and it still completely blows me away. And I can see when you tell it to me as well. It's an emotion. It's to think of a 17-year-old girl going through that, and that's through no fault of your own. That's just a complete hormonal imbalance. Did they do blood tests? Did they test?
They did.
Is that how they did the progesterone?
They did, and they just used the reports and the recordings that my mum and dad had made, and it was very conclusive. And the fact that I responded so well to progesterone, and it was quite extraordinary because although they got my hormones balanced, it was a very significant time because my barrister, Mr. Adezio, was the most charismatic man I'd ever witnessed. And I was told, I was in the cells underneath the Old Bailey, and I was told to expect 12 to 15 years in Holloway. And they did say they would appeal, but they said it was a huge risk that they were taking. So, I was kind of this broken woman. And when I came up into the courtroom, and I was actually charged with arson, endangering life, and intent to kill my mother, because my mother was in the house at the time. And these were quite, scary moments, but my barrister was mesmerizing. And in my mind, I just witnessed charisma. And I just thought charisma seems to be able to transform people's lives. It changed my own life against all the odds. So, when I was 18, I was actually 18 at the time of the court case, it was almost like it was my path. So that's why, because people often say to me, why have you studied charisma for 30 odd years?
Yeah.
And it was because of my barrister. So, and it's not always the answer people expect, from, why are you doing charisma to this? It's a bit, But one of the things that was really, really tough that people don't get, because it was all like this amazing Christmas story. And suddenly, I walked free and back into a happy family. But I'd still done all these terrible things. And I was completely broken.
Yeah.
And I hated myself. And I had such self-loathing. And I remember feeling really scared that I had to somehow function in society, having committed all these dreadful things. I'd been so horrible to my family. And I remember chasing my mum around the house with a knife and all this stuff. I hated myself. And at some point, I realized that I had to forgive myself. I had to make a choice. I either was going to top myself again, or I had to find purpose from what I'd done through, what I'd gone through. And that's why I decided to see if I could heal myself emotionally as well. So it's been a bit of a journey, and it's taken quite a while. I mean, now, you can't go from this violent, weird woman, a 5 stone overweight, bloated, self-loathing, to the woman I am today overnight. It took me years, and I didn't know anything at all.
No, as you know now. I mean, so when you were at home, before you did that, were you having good times? So when you were 15, 16, were you having sometimes during that period where you were like, I feel fine, everything's normal, and then it would switch? Yes. Because your progesterone you were like, first 2 weeks of your cycle is your estrogen level. So you obviously, hopefully would have been pretty much okay then. And then as your progesterone should be coming in, with that not coming in, that's for a lot of women, what causes these PMS symptoms, and it can be anything. It can be painful bosoms, it can be feelings of anxiety, it can be enrage, it can be jealousy. It's, I think a lot of women will recognise that all of a sudden, I just want to kill anybody that says the next thing.
Well, it's totally...
You were having times when...
Yeah, and it felt like there were two Nicolas. There was a good Nicola, who was a really sweet, kind of kind girl. And then there was this monster in me, and it felt like Jekyll and Hyde. It literally did. And what was so difficult for me is that I didn't know it was my periods. I just felt there was something evil about me. And that, when I was, in my good phase, I was then having to cope with the fact, I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I was so unkind. I can't believe I've just taken another overdose again. And why? And people kept saying to me, why? And I couldn't explain it. It was just this huge depression, this self-loathing, and then I'd be fine again. And it was that was so difficult to deal with. And even now, there are so many women that suffer from a hormone imbalance or PMS. And even now, a lot of doctors, that the first thing they do is prescribe antidepressants, which is actually the worst thing you can do because it's a hormonal issue. All antidepressants do is mask the real cause. So, I'm really shocked that more hasn't been done around hormones, because when you get your hormones right, everything is much easier to work with, emotionally and physically, as you know.
Yeah, no, life's a lot nicer for you and everyone around you. But, and like you say, though, in the 70s, you can think, okay, maybe there wasn't that understanding, but absolutely what you say is absolutely right. I can't believe the amount of women who come to me who are on antidepressants for PMS, for those sorts of symptoms. And there are lots of things that you can do to alleviate those sort of symptoms, and actually a lot of those things are the last things you feel like. So, when you feel like that, you do feel like sugar, you want more sugar, you do things whatever you want to do to excess. Whereas actually, the sugar, one of the things that we really notice is that when we take the sugar and we clean up people's diet, that a lot of their symptoms are alleviated. But actually, if you have got low progesterone, you do need that help to pick that up. Yeah. And it's interesting to think how many people are in that position now that don't know it, because it's not something that we do. Our GPs do. They don't test hormones regularly, unless you're coming into the menopause, and then they might test you just to see if your estrogen levels are dropping. But other than that, it's sort of like a bit of a, they'd rather give you that tablet.
There are lots of things you can do yourself. And there's a really good association. They're a registered charity, which is the National Association of Pre-Menstrual Syndrome. And that's got some very good practical tips, if you think you've got PMS. But if your body is not making enough progesterone, you need to have progesterone. So, there are, and I remember, initially I was given Dufaston, which was kind of synthetic progesterone. And then I was given intramuscular injections of progesterone because I needed And I learned how to inject myself. It was an intramuscular injection, which was quite scary. I practiced for ages on an orange to practice sticking needles in yourself. And then I had implants every 3 months that, slow releasing. And I think there's more they can do now. It's, that was very kind of old fashioned stuff.
Yeah.
But it was quite a miraculous change that I suddenly felt better. I still felt terrible about what I did, but there wasn't if you like, a physiological reason why I was feeling bad. And, over the years.
But then I processed that then.
Well,
because processed it before.
Yes. And I did, as my hormones were balanced and, I wanted to kind of heal myself. I wanted to kind of, I lost weight. And I was quite proactive with stuff, but it was difficult. And, there's a lot of, we go through a lot of things where we do things in our life and we judge ourselves quite harshly. And unless we can forgive ourselves for what we've done, it's very, very difficult. It really is.
And how long do you think it took you to, I mean, what happened after that? Start to into the world? What happened as you got into your 20s and stuff like that? Do you think it had an effect on your life?
It really did. So I missed out on kind of, going out with boys, so in my teens, it was, I had such a dysfunctional time in my teens that my understanding of men was, stuck in a time warp. So, when I started mixing with men at the age of 20 and stuff, when I kind of, I had a real self-loathing. So I ended up in a relationship with a man that was much older than me, who was incredibly violent. And I somehow thought, well, this is how it is. And then, I kind of was very promiscuous because I was so desperate for love. And I also was so grateful if anyone actually wanted to sleep with me. It was like, oh, wow, I'm so grateful, because I had such low self-worth. and I also had quite a number of horrible things that happened to me in, with men. And I think that I stopped trusting men a lot. And funny enough, now I work with an awful lot of men. It's, I can see that they're just doing the best they can, but I had to do a lot of work on myself with relationships because, unless you love and appreciate who you are, you can't expect anyone else to. But I had a very immature approach to relationships. So, even in my 40s and if I'm honest, my 50s, I'd be a bit of a drama queen and a bit selfish, I'd just have a moment and think that, and that was very unlike me, so it was, relationships have been a struggle. And also just learning how to really love and accept my body, the body that I abused for years. I mean, I still have terrible scars, on my hands and my wrists. And, I have all these kind of burn marks on my stomach and, I was grotesque, but actually learning to love my body and give it a fighting chance to respond and start to honor it by eating lovely, nutritious food and look at myself, with in a loving way rather than a judgmental way was really important. And it took me a long time to look in the mirror and not see a monster. It's that took a long time. So, and then I was also told I would never have children because, all of the progesterone I was taking meant it was almost like a contraception and they couldn't risk it. And then just as a miracle, my daughter came along. It was just such a miracle. Funny enough, she had very bad PMS, but I was able to recognize it straight away. And she was put on kind of, progesterone replacement therapy and it was absolutely fine. So it's very the benefit of hindsight, but my daughter could have gone the same way that I went, Well,
it does. It makes me think how many women have done that. How many women are in prisons and in places because of something that they've done during a time where, because I know myself when I've had, coming up to my period, I will do something, and as you say, that is completely irrational. And I don't, even at the time, I don't know why I'm doing it, but I can't stop myself.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
exactly it, Kim. That's exactly it. Yeah.
nasty. And,
Yeah.
you know,
And even things like that, if you look at women who caused road accidents, a huge percentage of them, it's just before their period. So it affects things like concentration. It affects loads of things. I mean, there's emotional, there's physical symptoms.
Yeah.
And also they did some research on, children who wet the beds. And they found that children who wet the beds, they wet the bed during their mother's kind of PMS period. So that's how they was responding, the anxiety around bedwetting. And they were just so tuned into the mother's energy that there was a natural anxiety around the mother. So it's quite an extraordinary thing, but definitely worth looking at.
My son, when recently, and I said to him, why are you being so awful at the moment? Why aren't we getting on? And he said, why am I being so awful? He said, it's you. He said, every time you say something to me, you're just shouting at me. And him and I have a really good relationship. And it just hit me. And I was like, my God, it is me. And so they do pick up on that energy. And I would say I don't have PMS. I would say I'm pretty much level, but I do still have certain degrees of it. I feel myself change and I'll suddenly feel like, oh, what's wrong with me? And it's that lunar full moon sort of feeling of I'm feeling a bit crazy.
I know.
Watch out. Well,
it's unique to women. It's one of the things we have to kind of understand more about. And I think I wish we could understand more about it, because it's often the cause of so many things that are then misdiagnosed, or, and antidepressants, as you know, really don't work in the long term. They just treat the symptoms. They don't treat the cause, and it doesn't go away. And just being on antidepressants.
So many other problems. One of the side effects of antidepressants, if you look on the bottle, is actually depression. That's how crazy it is. And it just seems that, if anybody is listening and is having, there is actually a test you can have now called the Dutch test, which is the dried urine test. It is a Dutch something test. Anyway, they test your dried urine and they test your progesterone. They test all the types of estrogens. You've got 3 or 4 estrogens, and they test the whole lot, and they can tell you your levels and your testosterone. And it's just a really amazing test to have, because you can find out exactly what's going on with your body and can save yourself. But these are the sort of things that aren't available day to day to women who might want some help. Instead, what they're given is an antidepressant as opposed to let's get to the root of the cause. Because, I went through a period when I had some progesterone drops, and natural progesterone, a couple of summers ago, because I was struggling, and then that affects your thyroid and has problems with your adrenals, and it can really go on, and there just isn't that amount of understanding. So for you, what happened as you got into your 40s, into your sort of perimenopause with your hormones? It was, there was a couple of important, moments. So when I gave birth to my daughter, because the placenta holds 40 times the amount of progesterone that you normally have, I felt fantastic in pregnancy. I was literally working up until I gave birth. Literally, I was on the phone while I was in labor, briefing my team on stuff. It was really weird. But there was as soon as I gave birth and the placenta left my body, I was given intramuscular injections of progesterone. And I don't know what it was, but almost from the moment I gave birth, I never had a problem with PMS again. It was really weird. It's almost like my body kind of realigned itself. I don't know. But I never needed to take it again. And then in my early 40s, I suddenly experienced black depression again. And, I started putting on weight. And I thought, okay, I'm either going mad, or I must be suffering from PMS, or I could be, kind of menopause. So, but I thought it was too young, I was only 42, I think, at the time. So I immediately went to see my specialist, and he just said, yes, you're in your menopause, an early menopause, but we just need to manage that process so that, it doesn't reoccur. So luckily I'm now out of all that.
I have nothing at all hormonally. I eat well. I kind of have a lot of balance in my life. I'm very aware of the impact of hormones. And, I'm 57, but I feel 37, Kim, and I feel that I'm in, the best shape that I've ever been in. I know myself better. I'm at the top of my game career wise. And it wasn't always the case. It's been a struggle. And I used to think that people who were in their 50s, oh, that's it, their life's over. But I'm having the most fantastic time. I love my life. I have a wonderful relationship with my daughter. I'm in a wonderful relationship, and it's like, the age is just no longer relevant in our society.
Yeah, I think as well for women coming into, so at 42, I know, so I'm 44, my body is changing, things are changing. For me, actually, things are calming down a little bit, but I know, as you start to come into menopause or perimenopause and about sort of my age, estrogen levels do start to drop. And that's what can also make you feel, because estrogen's quite a, we used to think that too much estrogen isn't good for you because you get, it's breast cancer, etc. But actually, an estrogen dominance isn't great, but we need to keep the levels of progesterone high, and they can both start to drop as we come into this time in our lives. But also for women, it's a real time for rebirth. This is usually for us, it's the end of our reproductive years. And for most of the women, it's a case of, well, I've given up. Even if you've had a career, if you've had children, you've had a family, women don't get to just have a career. If they want to have a career, 9 times out of 10, they can have their career, but they also need to manage a family, raise a family, and be really quite often sole carer for that family as well, and do all of that. And so as we start to come into this sort of time in our lives, it's like, well, actually, I am ready to do something for me now. So, I know for myself, it's like, okay, this is what I've had a career and a business, but now it's like, I don't need to be at home for anybody. Nobody's relying on me, so I can go and do. And I think that one of the things that is actually shown is that for women who don't listen to themselves in during this sort of time, listen to their higher self, listen to, as we've spoken before on the previous call, is about what they really want and who they truly authentically are. If they go against that, that's when the body starts to fight back. That's when the hot flushes come. That's when the night sweats come. That's when the feelings of overwhelm and anxiety come, because they're not following their true path and their true purpose. So it's a time for rebirth, really, the menopause.
I think that's a really important point that you've just made, Kim, because I think that what was, the big dream for us in our 20s and 30s or 40s, it's okay to change the dream. And we are fluid in our desires, our emotions, but we are in a permanent state of change, and we are, evolving all of the time. So if we have the same old, vision for our future that we had in our 20s or our 30s or our 40s, it's going to change, and it's okay for it to be different. Yeah. And what I've noticed is that if I listen to my body tells me what it needs. So, when I first met you, and I was excessively exercising, if you remember, I'd gone into kind of, my whole thing at the time was I wanted to get in a relationship, and I wanted to get match fit for sex. And so I thought I needed a toned, tight body and everything.
I want to get.
Yes. And I think when you said, well, what's your goal? I want to get match fit for sex. So I then realized that actually, as my body was changing, I needed to be more gentle. And so, I stopped running. I stopped doing all the massively, the pumping weights, and I became more into meditation and yoga, different types of yoga. and walking. And it's not that any exercise is good or bad. It's about what feels good for you in that moment. And I always remember, when I'd gone through a particularly disastrous breakup and I was feeling completely drained. And I remember we had a conversation and I said, I'm not exercising. I'm not doing this. And I'm putting on weight and everything. And I remember you saying to me, Nikki, it's okay just to be more gentle in yourself, allow your more feminine energy to come out. And when you feel ready to run again, you will, and you might not ever want to run again, but, just listen to your body. And it's interesting that I really find that is a very important thing as you get older, that, and our perception of what perfection is. And actually there's nothing more sexy than inner confidence and a woman who's really comfortable in her own skin. It gives her a sassy sexiness that is just, delicious, really.
Yeah.
And, it's a bit like with men. Men can also be, really good looking, but there's something really unattractive about them. But you can get some quite ugly men and they're sexy. And, they really are. And I think it's all about how we feel about ourselves is, the most important thing when it comes to attraction.
But again, though, I always use one of the examples that you use about your aura and your energy. And I say to people, sexy is not a size 8. What do they all want now? The thigh gaps or the big boobs or the big lips or whatever. That is not sexy. Sexy is you walking into a room and the energy that you give off. That's what attracts people to you. It is not, people don't walk into a room and think, oh wow, look, she fits in that little box. That's got nothing to do with it. It's the energy that you give off, and the energy comes from who you are and how you feel about yourself. And like you say, there are lots of unattractive men that women fall at their feet. I think I'm married to one. No, I'm not. Like, that he'll turn me off that. But and I think as well there's a real danger as we go into our mid-40s and 50s and into our menopausal years and beyond, that we take the mindset and the habits of who we were in our 20s and 30s with us. And when we do that, there's a real disconnect. And I think, saying she who hasn't actually been through the menopause yet, but, I think that actually a lot of the symptoms and stuff come from that whole thing around your life rather than the physical stuff. It is that you're still trying to be the perfect wife. And actually, quite often your husband might be thinking about retiring and you might have inside you a burning desire that you've never achieved. One of my clients has just started her art again. She was an amazing artist, and actually husbands have been working all these years, but us women, we're ready to rock and roll as we get to this age, and we're like, well, this is our time now.
I think it's about being authentic and being true to who you really are. And the more you are, connected with your true self, the more energy you have and the more attractive you become. And it is all about, the level of alignment between your conscious mind, your unconscious mind. And, I don't know if your listeners actually believe in the higher self or the soul, but, we have these different facets that make up us, of which our body is, if you like, a reflection or a manifestation of what's going on with the other three. So when we feel completely okay about it, it was interesting because, I, as you can tell, I've got some wrinkles on my forehead, and I just thought, oh, I've got wrinkles on my forehead. And, it was very tempting to do a bit of Botox. And then I thought, hang on a minute, how can I talk about being authentic and actually then try to remove the wrinkles? It's almost like I was judging my wrinkles as bad. And, it's not to say I don't want to look after my skin, but I was constantly looking for natural, honoring ways rather than fight and try and look like I did in my 20s. It's just being, how can I make the most of who I am now? And what I've learned is that, that aging, sugar is really, really aging. That's something really, sugar, alcohol, coffee, and processed foods, they actually do show up a lot in the skin. Whenever I follow the principles that you set out, that I've been following now for a long time since working with you, is that, you are what you eat. So, it is important to eat food that is going to, really make your skin look fresh. And, and the other
life
thing is
force food, we say.
Yes. And that
food that's full of life.
I've become a vegetarian. And the reason I've become a vegetarian is because I'm really sensitive to energetic vibration. And I became a vegetarian because I noticed that meat actually tended to lower my vibration. I felt heavier vibrationally on it. And I was concerned that if I was eating meat, I was eating a vibration of fear. Do you know what I mean? From animals who've been kind of, whatever it was. So it's like, I think but I only noticed that later on in life, so I think it's about, we are beautiful. It's a bit like, if you think about it, in a garden, chrysanthemums are the latest flower to bloom, but they're still around in the autumn.
Right.
And, it's like all the other beautiful flowers, they've blossomed, they've radiated, they've looked beautiful, but it is the chrysanthemums that still add the color in the garden. And they kind of hold the garden, in reverence. And I think that as we get older, we are these chrysanthemums, that we're late bloomers, but it's lovely to see a woman really come into her own. And it's never too late to do what you want. And I remember reading a book about a lady called Marva Hooks, who took up mountain climbing when she retired when she was 60. And then when she was 80, she climbed Mount Fiji. And I thought, that's my kind of woman.
Wow.
You know what I mean? And it's like, if you look at women now, there's some incredible women doing amazing stuff. And they're all gorgeous and sexy in their own unique way. The women that try to hang on to youth and what used to be are the ones that experience a real emotional dysfunction in that how they express themselves, from a psychological point of view. And it looks sad. You see women that are desperately trying to hold on to youth when actually it ages them,
Yes. Yeah, it does age them. And I just think, like you say with Botox, I'd never have that because I'm all natural and I won't have it. But I am starting to look at my wrinkles and think, oh, I'm getting some wrinkles. And then you just think, well, that's me. That's it. That's who I am.
We can't be the same as we were in our 20s. And I remember someone saying to me once that, when I'm in my 80s and I look back on photographs of how I look now, I'll think, oh, I look so young, So it's all contextual, isn't it?
Yeah, and most women, I know it sounds, and it's the hard and the boring way, but if you drink your water, if you eat your life force foods, your vegetables and your fruits, and and if you're happy, if you live a happy life and you get out there and you do some exercise and you reoxygenate your blood, it does keep you looking younger. It keeps your body young, but definitely smiling and happiness and laughter is the key, I think, to staying young.
Yes, it is.
That's what I say at 44. I might be saying Botox and anything going by the time I'm 70. I'll be like,
Kim,
one of those faces.
You have such a radiance and a vibrancy about you. And you're so expressive and, enjoy it. It's like, again, it's about, we need to be at peace with the changing face of our body. It's all changing all the time, and that's okay. And actually, if I'm really honest, the way I look after myself now, my body's probably in better shape than it's been for years. And I never thought I'd say that. I'm pretty body confident now, and I never used to be. I never used to be, and now it's like I would wear a bikini.
Yeah, I would say the same, to be honest, Nikki. I would say, I can remember in my 30s when I first became a personal trainer, and I look back at the pictures, and I was tiny, but I remember thinking I didn't like my body at all, and I would be running and weights and and tiny body. Whereas now, I'm not so tiny. I can fit comfortably in my jeans. I've got bits and bobs that probably are where they shouldn't be. But you know what? I quite like my body. I don't mind my body at all. You know, it's my body. So if you don't like it, that's not my problem. It's my body and I think it's okay.
Yeah.
So there. If it upsets you in a bikini, then that's your
what I think
luck. It doesn't bother me in a bikini.
It's whatever you wear it with attitude. I love that. Do you know what
Exactly.
I mean? I really love that. I love it when women can dress in a way that completely expresses who they are. And they're not kind of going to be, you know, kind of conform to fashion or what they think they should wear. It's like you dress as you. You know, the words that you would describe yourself in terms of your personality should be reflected in the clothes you wear. You know, everything needs to be authentic, really. And, you know, and we have wrinkles. You know, as we get older, we get wrinkly, and gravity causes all sorts of things. But you know what? It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. We don't mind. We're going to do it. Well, I was going to say we're going to do it gracefully, but I'm not. I'm going to get worse. I'm going to do it more and more disgracefully as I get older. Why not?
Well, you know that I've been quite disgraceful as I've got older, and I'm having the most fun ever. So it's just like, life is just a game, isn't it, really? And we have to enjoy it.
Yeah, exactly. Brilliant. Thank you once again, Nikki. I nearly called you Nicola then. Is that what your mum calls you? Yeah, I won't call you Nicola.
Yeah, so I feel I've done something wrong then. Yeah, so
I know.
Absolute pleasure.
That was awesome. Thank you for sharing that story. I think it's just a really powerful story it's just so powerful to see what can go wrong, and also to see where you were, and that was not the end. You didn't make that the end. You made your life. You wrote your own story. You wrote a different story from that moment onwards, and that's amazing. Thank you. Oh, just remind us your website where we can find you, where we can get some hypno downloads, etc.
Some hypno downloads. They sound really good, don't they? Hypno meditations and anything else like breathing exercises, how to balance your energy systems, and just, blogs to inspire you and get you really feeling empowered about, your potential and how you can change your life. My website is nikkiowen.com. NIKKI Owen. Thank you, Kim.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Nikki. Take care.
So that's all for now. Go away, enjoy the rest of your day, and have a good think about it. We hope you enjoyed the Living Your Legacy podcast. If you did, subscribe and come back for the next one. If you didn't, well, there's no accounting for taste.